Hi guys, so yes, we are going to have a small discussion about the physiological effects of parathyroid hormone at the basic levels. Starting from physiology, it has main effects on three organs: bone, kidney, intestine. In the intestine, what does it do? It causes increased calcium reabsorption via the help of calbindin. Yes, in the kidney, it will basically lead to calcium reabsorption from the distal tubules and phosphate wasting. That means more phosphate will be going out in the urine from the proximal convoluted tubule area. In the bones, it has two different effects. At low doses, PTH has osteoblastic activity, and at high doses, PTH has osteoclastic activity. What do I mean? That if you give low intermittent doses of parathormone, you'll be basically helping in bone formation, and you can detect bone formation activity by testing for these three chemicals, that is bone specific alkaline phosphatase, osteocalcin, and propeptide, that is type 1 procollagen. Absolutely. What happens when you give PTH at high doses? Then the rank ligand on osteoblast binds to the receptor for the rank ligand on the osteoclast, and that ensues osteolytic activity, which is better known as bone remodeling. This bone remodeling leads to increased bone turnover, which is designated or indicated by increased levels of serum alkaline phosphatase, and bone resorption leads to development of these hollow cystic blood filled structures in the bone. What are they known as? One big name, one small name. Big name is osteitis fibrosa cystica. That means the bone gets eroded, gets filled in with fibrous tissue, and basically leaves behind a cyst which gets filled with blood and fibrous tissue. So osteitis fibrosa cystica, and this dried up blood looks brown in color, so it's also known as a brown tumor. Good. So that is what we were talking about, and this is these are the common sites where it is found. I hope you are aware of that. This is in the tibia, and this is in the metacarpals. Right. This obviously you can understand is the salt and pepper skull. Salt and pepper skull seen in hyperparathyroidism. Yes. Why does it happen? Of course, due to this bone remodeling. You can see that the appearance it gives due to the external diplo expansion, the outer table getting eroded, the inner table trying to compensate. So this entire process which happens basically manifests as a hard shell of radiolucent bone outside and diploitic space thickening over here. So this is the salt, this is the pepper, and you have a salt and pepper appearance of the skull, also sometimes known as the pepper pot appearance, right? So yeah, we have some differentials of serum alkaline phosphatase conditions where it increases, such as rickets, osteomalacia, hyperparathyroidism, where it decreases, hypophosphatemia, and where it remains the same, such as osteoporosis, hypoparathyroidism, and multiple myeloma. Now we'll have a short discussion on primary hyperparathyroidism and secondary hyperparathyroidism. What does it mean? Hyperparathyroidism, that means there is increased production of parathyroid hormone or parathormone. If that is due to some unknown cause which is not known, a primary cause, that's known as primary hyperparathyroidism. That means the problem is in the parathyroid gland. The problem is in the parathyroid gland, right? Example of that is, yes, of course, very good. You have your parathyroid adenoma, and you know what parathormone does? It increases serum calcium, decreases serum phosphate. So whenever the serum calcium increases at different levels of serum calcium, you have different physiological effects. Mild elevation, normal serum calcium 9 to 11 or 8.5 to 10.5 milligram percent. So is slightly elevated, 11 to 12 milligram percent will manifest as renal stones or nephrocalcinosis, and you will have that low to groin renal colic pain sometimes, ureteric stones sometimes, right? Then abdominal groans is due to constipation and gut sphincter spasm. Whenever there's hypercalcemia, there's spasm of the gut sphincters, you cannot defecate properly, you have abdominal groans, abdominal spasms. Your fractured bones, as we already told you, the bones get thinned out, the calcium comes into the blood, and sometimes this calcium gets deposited in the skin, calcinosis cutis, and in the blood vessels, so pseudo hypertension, and then deposition in the brain material gives rise to psychic phenomena, and the person starts moaning, groaning, becomes disoriented. And the CNS manifestation of hypercalcemia is more prominent when the serum calcium is between 12 to 13 milligram percent. Bradykinesia, rigidity, and sometimes secondary Parkinsonism can occur. What happens when the serum calcium is between 13 to 14 milligram percent? Yes, the person may die. How? Systolic arrest. Absolutely. Very good. Diagnosis, you will see calcium is high, phosphate is low, increased bone turnover, so ALP will be high, hyperparathyroidism, so parathyroid hormone will be high, and to localize a tumor, you can do a Cestam EB scan with technetium 99. If you do an ECG, you will see there's PR prolongation, QRS widening, AV block, and QT decrease. Yes, QT decrease is indicative of hypercalcemia, right? How do you stabilize the condition medically? You have lots of calcium in the body, you have to wash it out. How will you wash it out? You give IV normal saline 10 to 20 ml per kg, right? And you wash it out with IV furosemide 40 to 80 milligram, maybe a single dose. Drug of choice, always bisphosphonates, ibandronate or pamidronate 60 to 90 mg IV. Calcitonin is being used because you know calcitonin is physiologically opposite to parathormone, so it can be used. Parafollicular C cells secrete them normally in the body, but they can be used. Artificial supplements, derivatives can also be given 200 to 400 international units subcutaneous 3 times a day for 24 hours, right? That could be given. Other things which could happen alongside this hypercalcemic crisis, entire syndromic management, how are we doing? There may be vitamin D intoxication. Already told you that in such a situation where parathyroid hormone is increasing, vitamin D may increase. So how do you physiologically antagonize hypercalcemia due to hypervitaminosis D? Yes, you give IV hydrocortisone 50 to 100 milligram 4 times a day, or prednisolone 5 to 15 milligram QDS, right? Prednisolone you can give by mouth. IV hydrocortisone you have to of course give parenterally. Mithramycin is an antibiotic, but due to its peculiar effects, you will see that this rank ligand interaction that is jeopardized, and so a particular dose 10 to 25 microgram per kg 4 times a day about a week is given mithramycin, and oral phosphate to chelate out the extra calcium can be given 250 milligram 4 times a day. Definitive therapy of course is resection of the adenoma. No adenoma, no extra parathormone, no hypercalcemia, no death, right? What is secondary hyperparathyroidism? Secondary hyperparathyroidism means there is a jeopardy in the normal metabolism, physiology of your vitamin D, calcium, phosphorus, this entire axis of the body, which basically causes a rise in parathyroid hormone due to some jeopardy in the normal feedback mechanisms in the body. Let's just take you through the entire cycle. I think it will be easy for you. There are 2 ways vitamin D is synthesized in the body, major ways. Sunlight falls on the skin, 7-dehydrocholesterol gets converted into cholecalciferol, or the gut, you know, we take in vitamin D, cholecalciferol. Both these forms go to the liver, and liver has an enzyme known as the 25 alpha hydroxylase. What does it do? It converts cholecalciferol into 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol. Now this 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol goes to kidney, where you have 2 enzymes, 1 alpha hydroxylase for the positive axis and 24 alpha hydroxylase for the cutoff axis. Basically, if you need to synthesize active vitamin D, this is active vitamin D, 125 dihydroxy cholecalciferol, whereas this 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol which was being formed in the liver was basically a premature form of vitamin D. This premature form could either be converted into this active form by 1 alpha hydroxylase in the kidney, or it could be converted into the inactive form 24-25 dihydroxy cholecalciferol by the 24 alpha hydroxylase present in the kidney. That is a parallel pathway that happens when too much of 125 dihydroxy cholecalciferol is being formed, and yet there is enough substance, enough 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol, and you don't know what to do with it. Then you divert it and convert it into 25 dihydroxy cholecalciferol. That is an alternate pathway, backup pathway, plan B body has, right? Now what will happen? This active vitamin D goes to the gut with the help of calbindin, causes calcium absorption, so serum calcium rises. Again from the bone it will cause resorption, and this resorption increases the calcium load in the blood. This increased calcium goes and inactivates or inhibits parathormone, and as you know, parathormone actually is an activator of this 1 alpha hydroxylase in the kidney. That means what was happening? There was inactive vitamin D, in your liver, 25 hydroxy cholecalciferol, right? Then 1 alpha hydroxylase in the liver was converting it into active vitamin D, 125 dihydroxycholecalciferol, and that enzyme 1 alpha hydroxylase was being monitored, was being controlled by a positive feedback by PTH. That means parathormone is there, it is giving a permissive effect on 1 alpha hydroxylase enzyme in the kidney, that you convert inactive 25 hydroxycholecalciferol into active 125 dihydroxycholecalciferol. Now calcium in the blood inhibits this PTH. That means when there is increased calcium in the blood, it will inhibit this parathormone, and so parathormone will no longer stimulate 1 alpha hydroxylase, so inactive vitamin D will no longer get converted into active vitamin D, and if this is cut off, obviously calcium in the blood will also be cut off, and this negative axis will also be cut off. That is the end. That is how the entire circle maintains itself. Good. Now what will happen? If you have a chronic kidney disease, as it is, without any feedback inhibition, your kidney is gone. So 1 alpha hydroxylase is gone. If there is no 1 alpha hydroxylase, this will not be formed. 125 dihydroxycholecalciferol, active vitamin D, will not be formed. So serum calcium level in the blood will fall. So increased calcium inhibits PTH. If there is decreased calcium, there will be what? Decreased calcium will cause increased PTH, and increased PTH is hyperparathyroidism. So if the kidney is failing, there is an increase in the PTH. This is secondary hyperparathyroidism. How does it manifest itself? You will have what? We already said, calcium is not being formed. That means all these activities which are happening, there is no calbindin mediated calcium absorption in the gut, there is no resorption of the bone. Since there is no resorption of the bone, you see the spine, it becomes like this. Bone gets deposited over here, it looks like a jersey, rugger jersey. So the spine is known as rugger jersey spine. At some places there is erosion, so you have osteitis fibrosa cystica, which I already told you, dense rim of sclerotic bone surrounding a hollow cavity with fibrinous blood material, brown tumor. Then you will have decreased bone on the medial aspect of the third and fourth metacarpal bones. These metacarpal changes which we just showed you, right? Yep, here. And these bones will also have an extra medial deposition of the bone. So whatever the thing is, ultimately you will see that these changes are indicating towards a hyperparathyroidism mediated bony changes secondary to a chronic kidney disease, which we summarize as secondary hyperparathyroidism. Now if your kidney is failing, there will be phosphate retention. So what is the major treatment, or first thing you need to keep in mind while treating this disease? Don't think it the other way around. Don't think that you have hyperparathyroidism secondarily, which will drive out your phosphate out of the kidney. Yes, that will happen. But you imagine the kidney is failing first. Now, so if kidney fails, you cannot excrete phosphate out. If you cannot excrete phosphate out, what do you need to do? Any phosphorus containing food, you cut down. The daily phosphate intake should be limited to 800 to 1000 milligram per day. That is it, not more than that. If there is excess phosphorus in the body, kidney is not being able to excrete, so you chelate out the phosphorus. Phosphorus binders. What are phosphate binders? They could be calcium containing ones like calcium carbonate. They could be non-calcium containing ones like sevelamer. Another thing, vitamin D is not getting formed. So you need vitamin D analogues. What analog will you give? Calcitriol. 0.25 to 1 microgram once a day, or if you give injection wise, then you can give 1 to 2 microgram IV 3 times per week. Very good. What else? What else can we give? Yes, I think it is very interesting and you need to know about it. Yes, you realize something? If there was no vitamin D, there was also no calcium. And since there was no calcium, there was no feedback effect on PTH, and PTH was increasing. So if somehow I am able to give a calcimimetic or introduce a substance in the body which looks like calcium, when that substance increases in the body, body senses that calcium is increasing, and this sense of increase in calcium will go and inhibit the secretion of PTH. So my hyperparathyroidism will come down, and so this calcium substitute we use is cinacalcet or calcimimetics. I hope this entire concept of hyperparathyroidism, primary, secondary, and the physiology of parathormone is clear to you. And now I would